Welcome to the Matt Bernier Show.
What's going on? Welcome in the Matt Bernier Show here on DRF TV, live.drf.com, livestream.com, as well as the Daily Racing Forum's Facebook and Twitter page. My name is Matt Bernier. Today is Friday, June the 23rd. You can follow along with me on Twitter at Bernier_Matt. Questions, comments, concerns, you name it, I'm there for you on Twitter. Our show this week is brought to you by our friends at Jack Thistledown. It's a big day of racing tomorrow afternoon at Jack Thistledown. You have the $500,000 Ohio Derby. We'll dive into that in depth in the second segment of this show. If you're new to the show, normally we'll go through, we'll handicap a couple races, we'll touch on some sort of a topic, and we'll go back and see how we fared the weekend prior as far as racing is concerned, with a couple of choices and selections, a possible vulnerable favorite, live long shot, or a most likely winner, something of that nature. If you check the show out, podcast version, YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, video.drf.com. Let's start off this week with doing a little bit of a rewind and taking a look back and seeing what happened last Saturday. It was a big night of racing at Churchill Downs underneath the Twin Spires, Louisville, Kentucky. The highlight in the main event Saturday night was the Grade 1 Stephen Foster Handicap. We had the return of Gun Runner, and he did not disappoint Travis Stone from the top of the lane.
He's on the outside, racing fourth. Nothing from Birdsong. Hawakam cut the corner off the turn. Top of the stretch in the Stephen Foster. And Florence Roux shakes up Gunrunner. A 2-length lead. Now it's a 3-length lead. Gunrunner by the 8th pole. Stanford battles on. Breaking Lucky does too with honorable duty. And Hawakam down inside. But there's 100 yards left. And Gunrunner with gusto in the Stephen Foster wins for fun. 5 in the end.
Really impressive performance from Gun Runner for Steve Asmussen. You take a look at the horse profile right now if you're watching along with video. This horse really has blossomed into something here as a 4-year-old. He was always talented as a 3-year-old, but you know, he had his moments where he was a bit of his own worst enemy, maybe a little bit goofy, a little bit green, and you even saw there down the stretch in the Foster popping back and forth with his leads. I think that's nothing more than a product of him being bored, knowing that there was nobody within hailing distance. He wins this race by 7 lengths. He earns a 110 Beyer speed figure in the process. And now we have a string of 110-plus Beyer speed figures for a horse like Gun Runner. And the beautiful thing about Gun Runner is, you know, he has that sort of, let's call it versatility, where he's at his best when he's outright on the lead, but he's shown in the past the ability to sit and press a pace. And I think that was probably the most surprising thing that we saw in the Foster, was that Birdsong, who had drawn the inside, did not go. We expected there to be some pace, and maybe Gun Runner would need to show something, I don't want to say different, but show a different dimension than what we had seen most recently, and prove that he was as good sitting off of a target as he was outright on the lead. For one reason or another, he finds himself outright on the lead, and he just, you know, really cements the fact that he is one of the best horses in the world, certainly one of the best dirt horses in the world. But at the same time, I couldn't help but feel like, you know what, the connections have got to be very, very thrilled, but also a little bit thinking, my goodness, we are very clearly one of the best horses in the world, and we're still light years behind this horse.
Can he run them down? He's got to sustain a huge run at the 400. Gun Runner's 2 lengths clear from the elliptic. Arrogate's coming home down the outside. Gun Runner in front. Arrogate's picking him up on the outer though. Arrogate surged to the lead from Gun Runner. The world's best horse. The Breeders' Cup World Champion. The Pegasus World Cup winner. The world's richest ever horse in 8 starts. The $10 million Group 1 Emirates Airline Dubai World Cup goes to Arrogate.
This horse is obviously Arrogate for Bob Baffer. It's a situation where you look at Gun Runner, and really over the past, well, let's say 5 years, maybe with the exception of American Pharoah, you can throw California Chrome in there as well. Gun Runner is right there with those likes. Again, maybe not American Pharoah, but California Chrome. Gun Runner and California Chrome, not that far off, I would say right now. Keep in mind, we saw Chrome as a fully matured animal. We're seeing what Gun Runner could possibly turn into. Arrogate is on the same trajectory, though, as far as timing is concerned. He's still a relatively lightly raced 4-year-old, and he had all those things go against him out in Dubai, and he still was able to win geared down by more than 2 lengths against Gun Runner. So it makes you wonder. You look down the road. The Breeders' Cup win-and-you're-in situation for Gun Runner with Stephen Foster. He's in the Classic. And I understand you have to go to the Classic. Why not? You're the second best horse in the world as far as dirt is concerned. But man, you've got to assume that Arrogate is going to continue on, and who knows? We've got a long way to go before the first Saturday in November when we see what happens in the Classic, and we've got to find out. Maybe Arrogate doesn't bounce back from Dubai as well as Gunrunner did, but at the same time, if you think just on the logical progression of getting older and maturing, that Arrogate can take another step forward, that we've already seen Gunrunner take his step forward, how is he going to narrow the gap? Because there is still a significant gap between the two best horses that we have on dirt. It sounds like we're going to see Gunrunner up at Saratoga here for the races like the Whitney and the Woodward. I think that is perfect. I think he's going to be odds-on in those races, even with the likes of a Shaman Ghost or maybe even a More Spirit, who we saw that was so impressive in a race like the Met Mile. I still think Gunrunner's probably in that even money 4 to 5 range when all those horses do show up at Saratoga. And Arrogate, it sounds like we're going to see him show up first in the San Diego at 1 1/16, well short of his ideal distance at 1 1/4. And then we'll see. He should go on to the Pacific Classic. Maybe you get one race in prior to the Breeders' Cup Classic for Arrogate, but it sounds like it's going to be an abbreviated campaign. And Gunrunner, meanwhile, here on the East Coast, he's going to rule the roost. The big question is going to be to see, is there any way possible for Gunrunner to narrow the gap? Because as impressive as he was when we just saw in the Stephen Foster last Saturday night, there is still quite a gap between he and the best horse in the world, Arrogate, for Bob Baffert. We'll see how everything goes. Hopefully everyone stays healthy. They go on their paths, both on East and West Coast, and meet up again down at Del Mar where the turf meets the surf for the Breeders' Cup Classic. We're going to take a break here on the Matt Bernier Show. When we come back, we're brought to you this week by Jack Thistledown. We're going to dive into their main event tomorrow afternoon, a $500,000 Ohio Derby. We get the return of Gervin and a couple other runners from the Kentucky Derby. Stay with us.
Ladies and gentlemen of Cincinnati, clear your dance cards, because this is an invitation from Jack. Jack says the best business to get into is monkey business. Jack says once in a lifetime can happen every night. Damn the torpedoes and tomorrow morning. Prepare to live it up, live it loud, and relive it all over late night chilly three-way. Because Cincinnati, this is really happening.
The winner of the Gun Handicap.
This horse is the complete package. He's won from 7 furlongs to 1 1/8. He's won on dual surfaces. He's won with and without Lasix, and he's traveled around the world and brought his A game with him.
He showed that he was a very top-class dirt horse.
Balance is key, and he was just perfectly proportioned. I think that's what made him so athletic and so efficient on the track.
California Chrome, straight and strong. Absolutely sensational. California Chrome. California Chrome. California Chrome. All the way to the Kentucky Derby. California Chrome wins impressively.
He's gone into overdrive. California Chrome wins the Dubai World Cup.
One of the greatest performances you'll ever see.
Chrome turns to gold.
Say goodbye to your inner caveman. If you're making caveman bets on pick sixes, you could be leaving money on the table. DRF Bets Ticket Maker helps you build more profitable exotic bets and place them with one click. Raise your game with DRF Bets Ticket Maker. Be a samurai with your ROI. DRF Bets Ticket Maker helps you cut out unprofitable exotic bets before they happen and be the master of profits. Raise your game with DRF Bets Ticket Maker, the exotic wagering app.
About 10 after 12 on the East Coast, 10 after 9 on the West Coast, the Matt Bernier Show here on DRF TV. We're brought to you this week by our friends at Jack Thistledown. Tomorrow is their big day of racing with the Ohio Derby. Before we dive into that, we are on day 4 of Royal Ascot. It's been a fantastic first few days, and things will wrap up tomorrow morning here on the East Coast anyway, real early morning on the West Coast. Saw some big performances. We've seen some very, very interesting racing. The Gold Cup yesterday was a fantastic finish. Big Orange getting the better of Order of St. George, but that's another story for another time. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time for everything. Let's dive into the main event at Jack Thistledown tomorrow afternoon. It's the Ohio Derby. It's $500,000 at the purse. Let's take a look at the fields. You're going to have to work with me here a little bit because keep in mind, the odds are, right now, my odds, my value line has nothing to do with a morning line. But considering you've got a 3-horse entry in here, it changes the numbers slightly, because essentially the 8-1 is all three of them combined. It is not individual interests, because if they were individual interests, I would have a couple of them much greater than 8-1. So I hope that made some sense with me trying to clarify that. We'll go right in post position order. The 1, not in post position order, I shouldn't say that, because really post position order, the 2 is going to be your inside horse. So we'll just go in numerical order. The 1, the 1A, and the 1X. Talk Less, Vibe, and Game Over. All the coupled entry for Luch Stables. I have them 8-1. The 2 is IRAP. I have him at 4-1. The 3 Untrapped, 6-1. The 4 Sorry Eric, 7-1. The 5 Gervin, 3-1. The 6 Fasted Accurate, 9-1. The 7 Hinton, 10-1. It's an interesting scenario when you have such a large entry in here. Really, I mean, it's almost a third of the field is all taken up in one betting interest. And it's also interesting that the betting interest happens to go out for connections that are not afraid to bet their money. So there's a real scenario that entry, whether you like the entry or not, or whether there's one horse in the entry that you like, you're probably not going to get every bit of the number that you should, just simply because there are other horses involved in it. I think the most likely winner in the race, I think a lot of people are going to look at 2 horses in particular, IRAP also, and Gervin. I personally think IRAP is a horse that needs to prove to me that one-off race down in the Bluegrass in Lexington was not a mirage, because he had everything go his way that day. You needed to be forwardly placed. He was, when Wild Shot spit the bit and finished up the track. IRAP inherited this thing turning for home, and he held on. And I think he had everything go his way. It also helped that you had a couple of horses coming off of subpar performances or coming off of layoffs, including McCracken. I understand the form of that race has come back to kind of flatter IRAP a little bit, whether it is Wild Shot in the Pat Day Mile, whether it is a horse like McCracken, who most recently Saturday night won the Matt Win. We've had a couple of other decent performances coming out of that race. I don't want IRAP. He is the one sort of stand against for me in this race. I think the most likely winner by, I don't want to say a long shot, but by a fair margin, is this horse that we're going to take a look at right now, and that's Gervin. This is Gervin winning the Louisiana Derby for Joe Sharp. It's unfortunate the way that he came into the Kentucky Derby, where it was much talked about, much discussed that he had a bad foot, and you see him now on the outside. He's going to come and he's going to do what Gervin always does. He's going to pop to his left lead, and maybe that was a sort of hint or a precursor that maybe there's going to be a little bit of a physical issue here with this horse. Again, the foot problem, he had bar shoes on, or at least on one of the front feet. Clearly, he's had some issues. I don't want to hold the Kentucky Derby against him, though, because I think he had a lot of things to go against, not just the foot situation, but really that was his first test against legitimate quality and legitimate company, and he had a wet track to deal with, and he had 19 other horses. So I don't think the Kentucky Derby is the race that you want to hold against Gervin. If you don't like Gervin in here, it's because you don't like the form or the company that he was keeping down in Louisiana, and you also don't like the fact that maybe he's a little bit goofy with his leads, and maybe he's a little bit of an ouchie sort. I personally happen to think that he is just so much the horse to beat in this race. For me, he is the most likely winner. As far as Untrapped is concerned, the number 3 horse, I think he is supremely talented, but there's a real thing that just sticks with me, and I see every one of his races on the far turn going 2 turns. He makes this big, bold move, and it looks like he is just going to roll for fun, and they get to about the 8th pole, and he flattens out badly, and he just has no finish. It just makes me think that this horse has some major distance limitations. I would love to see them turn him back eventually, get him to a 7/8 of a mile race, maybe a race like the King's Bishop. Maybe he's not good enough as far as talent is concerned for a race like the King's Bishop, but I don't think that a mile and an 1/8 is really what he wants to do. Maybe he proves me wrong tomorrow, but I think Untrapped, very talented, don't think he wants the distance. Talk Less is one part of that entire entry. I don't think he's good enough, plain and simple. I don't have much else to add. Vibe, you get Bob Hess, but I just don't know, again, that this horse is quite good enough to run in a race like this. Sorry Eric for Kent DeSormo is interesting, and Keith DeSormo, I should say, is the trainer. You know, he has shown some ability in the past. I wonder if his best surface is actually dirt. I wonder if he's better suited for the turf. He's run some decent enough races. He's kept decent enough company, but there's a couple of things. I'm not completely sold on him. The distance shouldn't be an issue at a mile and an 1/8, where it may be for some of the other runners in this spot, but sorry, Eric, he's an interesting runner. I would use him underneath and underneath only. I would not include him as far as multi-race wagers are concerned. Speaking of multi-race wagers, we will have a pick 4 play for Thistledown coming up tomorrow. It'll be up on the website on video.drf.com later on this afternoon, myself and Illman. We've already touched on Gervin. Fast and Accurate's a horse that I just don't I don't particularly like. I don't think he's particularly fast. I don't think the dirt is really what his game is. I think he's much better on the synthetic surface. I didn't love the effort most recently that was at Arlington over the synthetic surface. I just wonder as far as, I feel like he probably had all the things go the way he needed to have them go in the spiral, where it helped to be forwardly placed. He wasn't that far off the pace. Maybe it was a suspect group of horses that he was running against, and he just took advantage of his circumstance. I'm not going to hold that against him or the connections. I just, at the end of the day, I don't think he's quite this good. And that's acknowledging that this group is probably a notch below some of the better horses that we have as far as the 3-year-olds are concerned. The Tapperits, the Always Dreamings, the Cloud Computings, the Classic Empires of the world. Game Over, we'll touch on Game Over in a minute. But Hinton is another interesting runner in here. I made him 10-1 on the line, and if we could, guys, let's take a look at the entry card one more time and take a look at my odds. Hinton is a horse that really hasn't done a heck of a lot wrong. The biggest thing for me, though, that most recent race for him, he has some nice figures, but it came over a wet track, and I like the way that he finished. He dug in, he went and passed a horse, went and got him. I just don't know that he is one of the likelier win candidates, and as you can tell by the way that I have the odds, I don't have a really, really strong opinion in this race, other than I don't want IRAP at what's going to be shorter than the 4-1 odds that I have pegged him at. That leads me to the third part of the coupled entry, and that's Game Over. Game Over for me is going to be a live long shot, and he's my pick in the Ohio Derby. I know there are a lot of people, it sounds anyway, that are also trending this direction, so I wonder, he is the horse in the entry. If you like the entry, it's this horse. I would be hard-pressed, or I would have a hard time for anyone telling me that the reason you like the entry is for talk less or for vibe. I think the reason that you like the entry, if you do like the entry, is Game Over. Game Over is a lightly raced horse. He's only gone out 2 times. He's still very green. I think that may be a bit of a bugaboo for him here in a spot like this, going 2 turns, 1 mile and an 1/8, stretching out from 7/8 of a mile, but anyone that saw that most recent race at Churchill Downs, he was all bottled up in behind horses, turning for home. He had to wait, angled out over heels, goofy with the leads, but he went and finished the deal. He galloped out very well. At face value, the pedigree shouldn't be an issue at 9 furlongs, but again, until they do it, you never truly know. I think a live long shot in my pick in the Ohio Derby is one piece of the 3-plied entry in here for Luch Stables. I'm going to go with the 1X Game Over. I do think the most likely winner, though, is Gervin. The horse that I'm taking a stand against is IRAP for Doug O'Neill. We're going to take a break on the Matt Bernier Show. When we come back, again, we're brought to you this week by Jack Thistledown. When we come back, we'll dive into 2 other races coming up tomorrow afternoon. One from Belmont Park, one from Churchill Downs. Stay with us.
Ladies and gentlemen of Cincinnati, clear your dance cards, because this is an invitation from Jack. Jack says the best business to get into is monkey business. Jack says once in a lifetime can happen every night. Damn the torpedoes and tomorrow morning. Prepare to live it up, live it loud, and relive it all over late night chilly 3-way. Because Cincinnati, this is really happening.
It's the win, the winner of the Gun Handicap.
This horse is the complete package. He's won from 7 furlongs to 1 mile and 1/8. He's won on dual surfaces. He's won with and without Lasix. And he's traveled around the world and brought his A game with him.
He showed that he was a very top-class dirt horse.
Balance is key, and he was just perfectly proportioned. I think that's what made him so athletic and so efficient on the track.
California Chrome, straight and strong. Absolutely sensational. California Chrome. California Chrome. California Chrome. All the way to the Kentucky Derby. California Chrome wins impressively.
He's gone into overdrive. California Chrome wins the Dubai World Cup.
One of the greatest performances you'll ever see.
Chrome turns to gold.
Say goodbye to your inner caveman. If you're making caveman bets on pick sixes, you could be leaving money on the table. DRF Bets Ticket Maker helps you build more profitable exotic bets and place them with one click. Raise your game with DRF Bets Ticket Maker. Be a samurai with your ROI. DRF Bets Ticket Maker helps you cut out unprofitable exotic bets before they happen and be the master of profits. Raise your game with DRF Bets Ticket Maker, the exotic wagering app.
20 after 12 on the east, 20 after 9 on the west. The Matt Bernier Show on DRF TV, live.drf.com, livestream.com. Those of you following along on social media, thank you for doing so on the Daily Racing Forum's Facebook and Twitter page. Again, we're brought to you this week by our friends at Jack Thistledown. Big day of racing tomorrow afternoon. You've got the Ohio Derby, $500,000 the purse. That is the main event. If you check this thing out, podcast version, you've got YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, video.drf.com. Again, if you are new to this show, we go through every week. We try to smoke out some winners, maybe smoke out some vulnerable favorites. For better or for worse, we go back and take a look and see how we did. Really quickly, we're going to touch on the two races that we went over last week, and one of them is the Matt win. I thought going into it, the most likely winner was McCracken, a live long shot. Mo's Mojo. McCracken goes out at a very, very short number and gets the job done. Mo's Mojo, I don't know that... I mean, all right, just at face value, I was wrong. The horse ended up running fourth, but I at least feel I'm totally fine giving out a horse like that and betting a horse like that, like I did, knowing that, you know what, Julien Leparoux did what he needed to do. They took a shot. They went on to try to win this thing. He actually hit the front at one point, turning for home, and he just flattened out down the lane. I'd much rather have a live long shot like that they take a chance, they're going to try to go and win the race, and it just doesn't work. Maybe you're just not as good, or you were one of the few that actually went after a horse, similar to what Stanford did in the Stephen Foster. I have no problem. If you're going to go out on your sword and go out like that and say, you know what, no one else is going to go and try and win this race, let's see what we can do. Maybe we're going to pay the price, but you at least went and tried. That's why I don't have much of a problem with Mo's Mojo running fourth out of 6, because they took a shot, they tried, it didn't quite work. McCracken, just much, much better than those horses in this situation at this stage in the game, winning the Matt win. The fleur-de-lis, the complete opposite, for me anyway, from a handicapping standpoint. I thought the most likely winner and a vulnerable favorite at the same time going in was Forever Unbridled. We didn't know what we were going to get. She'd been gone for 7.5 months. She had ankle chip removed. You never know what you're going to get. But the most recent race that we had seen her in was the Breeders' Cup Distaff, and she was awesome that day to run third by less than 2 lengths behind Songbird and Beholder. And she went out there and she just absolutely buried that field in the fleur-de-lis. I understand the figure didn't come back all that fast, but when you consider she was never really asked for any run from Joel Rosario, kept her out in the clear throughout, just cruised around on her, gave her a little bit of a tap when he needed to, and she went on and extended. Got a little goofy with the leads. I'm not going to hold that against her. We know what she's capable of. It'll be interesting to see where she shows up next. I would like to think that we'll see her at Saratoga. Maybe you see her at Delaware, but I think that might be a little bit of a quick turnaround for the Delaware handicap. At any rate, she was the most likely winner. I thought she may have been a little bit of a vulnerable favorite, and she opened up Chile on the board. She was 2-1 for a long, long time, but she gets the job done. My live long shot was absolutely putrid. She was terrible, Romantic Vision, and I don't know what the heck happened, but that was not the horse that I had seen at Keeneland 2 races back. That was not the horse that we had seen run in the La Troyenne on Kentucky Oaks Day, running against the grain, against the bias of the racetrack. She was 2 or 3 lengths out of it going into the far turn, and she dropped anchor in a big, big way. She was awful. She finished last of 8th in there as my live long shot and my pick. So swing and a miss for that race for me. Let's see if we can do a little bit better here with these 2 races that we've got for you coming up tomorrow afternoon. Let's start off here locally. Belmont Park. Sounds like going to be a bit of a wet one tomorrow, so you're going to want to keep an eye on that, and maybe that changes eventually what my odds are. But let's take a look at the stakes race on tomorrow's Belmont card. You've got the Wild Applause, 1 mile on the turf, scheduled post time just a shade after 5:15. It's only a field of 6. Right in post position order, you have the 1 Rumgo, the 2 Lull, the 3 Bellavase, the 4 Super Marina, the 5 Talaki, the 6 Rubelinda. With my odds, Rumgo 3-1, Lull 5-1, Bellavase 10-1, Super Marina 16-1, Talaki 7-1, and Rubelinda 2-1. This is an interesting race because it's a matter of many of these fillies, we don't know what their ceiling is just yet, but there is one in particular that we really don't know what her ceiling is just yet, and that is the outside runner for Chad Brown. That's Rubelinda. I made her 2-1. On the morning line, she is less than that, and she figures to be even shorter than that come post time. Rubelinda, there was hype with her because she was the first winner for Super Racehorse and Super Sire already, Frankel here in North America, in the United States. And she was very, very impressive when she broke her maiden. She was a little bit on the green side. She was down on the inside. She had a good trip. When she was angled down to the clear, the ears are cocked and just playing all around. But boy, she had a big turn of foot. That was at 6 furlongs. She's going to stretch out to a mile here. The distance should be no issue whatsoever. I think she is the most likely winner in the race. I'm not picking her, but I think she's the most likely winner. I also think she's a bit of a vulnerable favorite simply because She's facing winners for the first time. She may be catching less than firm going if the rains do show up tomorrow afternoon in Belmont, New York. And she's just going to be an unappetizing price. She's going to take a lot of money in here. We're at the point now with Chad Brown. I love Chad Brown. I think he is arguably the best trainer in the country. But we're at the point now where most of his horses in the past, maybe you'd lose a point or two. Now you're losing 3 to 4 points on these horses when some of them don't deserve to lose 3 to 4 points. She's just a horse that I want to take a shot against with my pick, and she didn't really fall into a live long shot category or any of those sort of things. But my pick in the race is Rum Go for Brad Cox with Javier aboard. The most recent run at Indiana Grand I thought was very, very impressive. If she takes a step forward from that race, I know she got a good trip, but she figures to be forward. If she sits just off of Lull, who I would expect to go to the front for Christophe Clement, if she sits just off her and gets the jump on the likes of Rubelinda and Talaki, I think Rum Go has a chance to win that race, the Wild Applause. Let's move on to the Chicago Handicap down at Churchill Downs tomorrow afternoon, Louisville, Kentucky. Big field. Let's take a look at that field if we could. You've got 13 scheduled, but Improv is likely to scratch. Now, that's going to change some things, and as it's listed as likely to scratch, my odds are going to need to change because until she is officially out, I actually had assigned her odds. So we'll go right in post position order. The 1 Pleasant Tales, 19 to 1. The 2 Athena, 32 to 1. The 3 Kath Ballou, 32 to 1. The 4 Minds and Magic, 16 to 1. The 5 Ivy Bell, 9 to 1. I understand right now we have listed on the screen Improv likely to scratch because she is likely to scratch. But until she does, I have assigned her 11 to 1 odds. Mela, 24 to 1. Finley's Lucky Charm, 2 to 1 as we turn over to 9 through 13. Sweetgrass, 13 to 1. She May Be Wild, 16 to 1. Covey Trace, 49 to 1. Put the Blame on Me, 7 to 1. And Stage Play, 49 to 1. I think the most likely winner by a long, long shot, and I know I only pegged her at 2 to 1, but the most likely winner of this race is Finley's Lucky Charm. And she has been nothing short of strong to very strong. She has a string of buyer speed figures. I believe it's 6 consecutive, maybe it's only 5, that are faster than anything else any one of these horses has ever run in their career. She lays over this field on paper. She is also one of those horses that, to date, I don't know if she can really sit. So the key to this race is, are any of these other girls going to go on with it? Are the connections going to look at it and say, we can't beat this horse if she's out there by herself, even at 7/8 of a mile, which may be a little bit of a concern. She seems to do her best running at 3/4. I don't think she can't be successful at 7/8, but to date, she's done her best running at 6 furlongs. Is it going to come down to some of these connections, or at least one of them, saying, you know, we're not going to let you just walk in the front end? We're going to have to try to take the race to you, and if we lose that way, similar to what I mentioned with Stanford and Stephen Foster, similar to what I mentioned with Mo's Mojo and the Matt Wynn, are you going to go out there and try to win the race, or are you going to be content to say, you know what, we're not as good as Finley's Lucky Charm, we're going to sit off and we're going to run for second? Because if that's the case, Finley's Lucky Charm will not lose this race. I need someone to go and do some dirty work early on to hopefully set it up for my live long shot and my pick in the race. I know she's 30 to 1 on the line, but Ivy Bell is razor sharp right now. Ever since these new connections have gotten a hold of her, they seem to figure out what she wants to do. She's rattled off 3 consecutive victories on dirt ranging from 6 to 7 furlongs. She's won pressing the lead. She's also won coming from way off of the pace. I think there are 2 horses that could be the key to the race. The 1 Pleasant Tales, the 12 Put the Blame on Me. I need one of those 2, if not both of them. I don't think both are going to go. But I need one of those 2 to go and push the issue with Finley's Lucky Charm. And even if they don't, and Finley's Lucky Charm just goes out there and wires this field, I think Ivy Bell, if you're playing the race as far as exotics are concerned, I think Ivy Bell is one to consider underneath. She's going to be a huge number, and maybe she can make an exacta or a trifecta if you're playing that and keying a horse like Finley's Lucky Charm on top, who figures to be pretty darn close to even money in a 13, possibly a 12-horse field, the Chicago Handicap at Churchill Downs tomorrow afternoon. That does it as far as handicapping is concerned. Again, for those of you watching live, thank you for doing so. Live.drf.com, livestream.com, Twitter and Facebook on the Daily Racing Forum pages on social media. If you check it out, podcast, YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, video.drf.com. Thank you to our sponsor this week, Jack Thistledown. They've got a big day of racing. You're going to want to stay tuned for that tomorrow afternoon. You've got the Ohio Derby. You've got other stakes races as well. Illman and I will have a pick 4 sequence up on video.drf.com later on this afternoon for Jack Thistledown. As always, we're going to roll right into this week's edition of Out of the Gate. Best of luck this weekend with all of your plays. We'll talk again next Friday here on the Matt Bernier Show, noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific.